This coming Shabbat is known throughout the Jewish community as Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Sabbath. In fact, it's one of really the only two Shabbatot over the course of the entire Jewish year that has a special name. The other one, Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat immediately prior to Yom Kippur, immediately following Rosh Hashanah. This is the only other one, Shabbat Hagadol. What's so great about this Shabbos? So many who explain, well, it's not so much that it's great, it's that it's big. Because what's big and great is the rabbi's sermon. It's traditional for the rabbi to give an extended sermon, a shiur, on Shabbat Hagadol, detailing an aspect of the laws of Passover or another important message that relates to the upcoming holiday. So perhaps it's a reference to the large and substantial drasha, the sermon, that the rabbi delivers traditionally on this Shabbat. But comes along Rabbi Yaakov, the son of the Rosh, the author of the classical halachic compendium, the Tur, the Arba'a Turim. And he cites a midrash that always struck me. And the midrash tells a story, says that year it happened to be that the 10th day of Nisan, the day on which the Jews were commanded to tie the sheep, the Egyptian god, to the very posts of their beds, that was a day that was Shabbat. It was indeed that day of the week. And the Jews, as they sought to take the Egyptian deity and to begin the process of the sacrifice, the Egyptians sought to stop them. They said, how dare you? How dare you insult our God in such a way? You're spitting upon us. This is completely intolerable. The Egyptians tried physically, violently, to stop the Jews from taking the animals as sacrifices, and yet God protected the Jewish people, ensured their safety. What a great miracle, says the Midrash, as cited by the Tur, and that miracle was so great, says the Tur, that was the reason that this is known as Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat upon which a great miracle took place. Sounds pretty exciting, sounds pretty impressive, but if you think about it for just a moment, it's actually quite bewildering. I mean, hold on one second. This is the great miracle of this time of year, so God's going to go ahead and perform 10 plagues. He's going to split the sea, and the Jews are going to cross right through, and the Egyptians are all going to be drowned afterward. And you're going to tell me that the time that the Jews tried to take the sheep, tie them around their bedposts, the Egyptians tried to hurt them and were unsuccessful. That's the great miracle of the Exodus. That makes this Shabbat Hagadol. What kind of strange miracle, what kind of unusual explanation is this for the significance of this upcoming Shabbat? So I read a very beautiful idea from my wife's grandfather, Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb, in his Haggadah. And Rabbi Lamb explains as follows. He cites Rav Yisrael Salanter, the great Musarist, the great thinker who concerned himself with the question of how we cultivate ethics within ourselves. And Rav Yisrael Salanter notes that so often we make the mistake of thinking that in order to elevate ourselves, in order to feel good about our own sense of confidence, about our own sense of esteem about ourselves, we so often need to first push others down. And he says, there are times when it's necessary for there to be a punishment or a consequence. So for example, when it came to the story of the Egyptian Exodus, God saw fit indeed to punish the Egyptians. It was a necessary lesson to teach them that enslaving an innocent people is immoral, is unethical, is intolerable. They needed to learn that God, the monotheistic God of Judaism, is the ultimate God. It was necessary for God to punish the Egyptians, and yes, even for the Egyptians at that time to drown inside the sea. And yet, says Rabbi Lamb, drawing on this thought of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, ultimately when we look at the miracles of the Exodus, there was one miracle when no one was hurt. There was one miracle when someone tried to harm someone else but was unsuccessful, and that was the miracle of when the Jews tried to take the sheep and slaughter it to their God. The Egyptians sought to hurt them, and the Egyptians were unable to harm the Jews. Drawing on Rav Yisrael Salanter, says Rabbi Lamb, we're meant to learn a lesson from God. Yes, it's true there are moments when consequences or punishments are necessary, but in order for us to raise ourselves up, there is not a reason to push others down. In fact, when we feel the need to insult others, that is precisely so often the sign that we don't really have a full sense of esteem. This upcoming Shabbat is a lesson not only, therefore, about the miracles of God, about the miracles of the Exodus and the upcoming holiday of Passover, of Pesach, but it is also a message about morality, about ethics, about how we think about ourselves and our relationships with others. There are times when, yes, there are punishments, there are consequences, but in the end, the greatest type of elevation is when we can see within ourselves to achieve spiritual, psychological, and religious elevation and growth without the need to push anyone else down. And in doing so, this Shabbat can truly be a Shabbat Hagadol.